If you're thinking about buying a car in Canada in the next 2 to 3 years, you need to know about BYD. Not because of the hype, because of the math. BYD, which stands for Build Your Dreams, is a Chinese automaker that sold over 4.3 million vehicles in 2024, making it the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer. They outsold Tesla on a global basis, and they're now setting their sights on the Canadian market. Their newest hybrid technology can travel over 2,000 kilometers on a single tank and charge. Their base models start significantly cheaper than comparable Canadian options, and their battery technology has been independently verified as among the safest ever produced. But this is Canadian finance, so we're not just going to talk about the cars. We're going to talk about what this means for Canadian buyers, what it means for federal and provincial EV incentives, and what it means for the Canadian auto sector, particularly the 100,000 plus workers in Ontario whose jobs are tied to the industry. I'm Sebastian. This is Canadian Finance, education, not advice. Let's get into it. Let's start with the technology, because you need to understand what we're actually talking about before we get to the Canadian implications. BYD's fifth-generation dual-mode hybrid system, called DM5, pairs a 1.5-liter petrol engine with a powerful electric motor. On its own, that sounds unremarkable. What makes it notable is the efficiency. The petrol engine achieves a thermal efficiency of 46%. For context, most gasoline engines convert roughly 30 to 35% of their fuel into actual motion. The rest is wasted as heat. BYD's engine wastes significantly less, which is why it achieves over 80 miles per gallon equivalent even when the battery is depleted. The result is a range of over 2,000 kilometers on a single tank and charge. That's Toronto to Halifax and back on one fill-up. The system comes in 3 versions. The DMI prioritizes fuel efficiency, designed for everyday commuting. The DMP adds performance for drivers who want more power. And the DMO is engineered for off-road use, a fuel-efficient hybrid designed for Canadian winters, gravel roads, and the kind of terrain that actually exists outside of downtown Toronto. Battery options range from a 10 kilowatt-hour pack giving roughly 80 kilometers of pure electric range to a 15.87 kilowatt-hour pack giving around 120 kilometers. For most Canadian commuters, that means the vast majority of weekday driving happens entirely on electricity, with the petrol engine as backup for longer trips. The architecture is also different from traditional hybrids. In most hybrid vehicles, the petrol engine is primary and the electric motor assists. In BYD's system, the electric motor leads and the petrol engine supports. It's a quieter, smoother driving experience and a more efficient one. The technology that has attracted the most serious attention from engineers and analysts isn't the engine, it's the battery. BYD's Blade battery uses long, narrow lithium iron phosphate cells arranged side by side, like blades, rather than the conventional stacked cell design. This eliminates wasted internal space, increases energy density by roughly 50%, and contributes structural strength to the vehicle itself. Lithium iron phosphate is a more chemically stable material than the nickel, cobalt, or manganese-based chemistries used in most other EV batteries. In independent nail penetration tests, one of the most extreme battery safety tests in the industry, BYD's Blade battery did not catch fire or explode. Most competing batteries do under the same conditions. The longevity figures are also significant. After 3,000 full charge cycles, the Blade battery retains 90% of its original capacity. At 1 full charge per day, that's over 8 years before meaningful degradation. For a Canadian driving in a climate with extreme temperature swings, from -30 in January to +35 in July, battery longevity and thermal stability are not minor considerations. For the Canadian buyer doing the financial analysis, battery replacement is one of the largest potential costs in EV ownership. A battery that lasts longer and degrades less is a direct financial advantage over the ownership period. BYD has also invested heavily in the vehicle intelligence layer, the software and sensor systems that control how the car operates. Their new centralized vehicle architecture, called Zhuangji, consolidates what used to be dozens of separate control units into a single unified system. Engine management, braking, sensors, and cameras all communicate through one core. The practical benefit is faster response times and simpler over-the-air software updates, meaning the car's capabilities can improve after purchase the way a smartphone does. Their autonomous driving system, called D-Pilot, comes in 3 tiers matched to different price points. The entry-level tier offers highway autopilot and automated parking. The higher tiers add more advanced hands-free driving capabilities. Even vehicles priced under $15,000 include features that were until recently exclusive to premium vehicles. The system is powered partly by real-world driving data from BYD's existing fleet, over 4 million vehicles generating 45 million miles of driving data daily. That data volume gives BYD a training advantage for their AI systems that is difficult for smaller manufacturers to replicate quickly. For the average Canadian buyer, the practical question is how these systems perform in Canadian conditions. Heavy snow, ice, reduced visibility, poorly marked rural roads. These are not the conditions these systems were primarily developed in, and independent Canadian testing data is still limited. That's a real caveat worth noting. Now let's talk about the part that actually matters for this channel. What does BYD mean for Canadians financially? Price is the starting point. In markets where BYD currently sells, their vehicles are priced roughly 15 to 20% below comparable Tesla models and significantly below comparable vehicles from German and Japanese manufacturers. If that pricing holds when they enter the Canadian market, it changes the EV value calculation meaningfully. The federal iZEV program currently offers rebates of up to $5,000 on eligible zero-emission vehicles purchased or leased in Canada. Several provinces stack additional rebates on top. Quebec offers up to $7,000, BC up to $4,000. Whether BYD vehicles qualify for these programs depends on whether they meet the Canadian content and pricing thresholds set by the federal government. This is where it gets complicated. In 2024, the Canadian government announced 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, matching similar moves in the US and EU. The stated rationale is protecting Canadian auto manufacturing from what governments characterize as unfairly subsidized Chinese production. The practical effect is that BYD vehicles imported from China would currently face a significant tariff that substantially raises their Canadian price. BYD's response has been to explore manufacturing partnerships outside China, in Mexico, Hungary, and other markets, which could allow them to supply Canadian buyers without triggering the China-specific tariffs. Whether and when this happens is unclear, but it is the path most analysts expect BYD to take to access North American markets seriously. For Canadian buyers watching this unfold, the practical advice is straightforward. The technology is real and independently verified. The price advantage is real in markets where BYD currently operates. The tariff situation is fluid and will likely evolve over the next 2 to 3 years. It is worth tracking, but not worth making a car purchase decision around today. The total cost of ownership calculation is also worth doing carefully. A vehicle that is cheaper to buy, cheaper to fuel, and has a longer-lasting battery may cost significantly less over a 5 to 7 year ownership period than a more expensive vehicle with a lower sticker price. That is the math Canadian buyers should be running, not just the sticker price comparison. The other side of this story, and the side that gets less attention in EV conversations, is what BYD's rise means for Canadian auto workers. Ontario is home to over 100,000 direct auto sector jobs and hundreds of thousands more in supply chain and related industries. Windsor, Oshawa, Brampton, these communities are built around automotive manufacturing. The transition to EVs was already creating pressure on traditional powertrain suppliers whose components are simply not needed in electric vehicles. BYD's entry adds another layer. If Chinese manufacturers can produce EVs at significantly lower cost, even after tariffs, it creates competitive pressure on the Canadian manufacturers and their supply chains that is difficult to absorb quickly. The Canadian government's tariff decision is partly a response to that pressure, buying time for domestic manufacturers to close the cost gap. The federal government has also announced significant investment incentives for EV battery manufacturing in Canada, including the Volkswagen and Stellantis Gigafactory deals in Ontario. intended to anchor EV supply chain jobs in Canada rather than losing them entirely to lower-cost producers. Whether those investments are enough and whether they arrive fast enough is genuinely uncertain. The transition is happening faster than most policy timelines anticipated, and the workers and communities in the middle of it are navigating real financial uncertainty that the broader EV conversation often glosses over. Both things can be true simultaneously. BYD's technology is genuinely impressive and offers real value to Canadian buyers. And BYD's competitive pressure creates real challenges for Canadian workers and communities that deserve honest acknowledgement, not just optimistic framing about the inevitable electric future. So where does that leave the Canadian buyer in 2026? If you're buying a car today, BYD vehicles are not yet widely available in Canada at competitive prices, partly due to tariffs. The technology is worth understanding, the market is worth watching, but it's not yet a direct purchasing decision for most Canadians.